Everyone who's showing up this evening for this very important webinar for me to talk about our campaign in 2022. This session is coming up, how we are going to push this legislation again to be passed, and only this time to be signed into law. And so I'm hoping that people that are on the web that have any questions or concerns about solitary, around the PROTECT Act, what it is we're trying to do, that they learn a lot this evening. And specifically legislators, we want them to have a vote, but an informed vote when it's time to come up for this issue. We want them hopefully to think of this legislation as not a political issue. It's not a religious issue. It's a human rights issue. And it's all about the human dignity of all people. And so once they understand that, hopefully the votes will be in line with their humanity and their compassion for other people. And so I want to start out with, I had a lovely event that I attended early this afternoon. It was in Cheshire. It was the Children's March, and it was about raising the voices of children. And it was given by this organization, I'm going to call them out, the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities. And I have to say it was a very nice march, but the disappointing part is when I asked to have, 60 seconds to talk about our children right down the street from here where we're marching, who are in isolation and have been in that position for months now. She was a little queabish about, that. You know how when people have marches and they're all sanitized, and when you start talking about that uncomfortable stuff, then all of a sudden they get a little nervous. So she got a little nervous about me talking about it. So I never had the opportunity, but I'm so glad that I went, because I got to have a lot of one-on-ones and people who just could not believe that right down the street from them, where they're having this children's freedom bell ringing, raising the voices of our children, that right down the street, we have so many children who are isolated in rooms and being psychologically harmed every day. And there were so many leaders in the church who were so excited about the opportunity. I had brought along some of the short forms of the PROTECT Act, the short version. And so they were looking at it, and I can tell when people are just faking and say, oh, I'm going to support you. These people were earnestly excited about supporting and pushing this bill, pushing this into becoming a bill and signed. And they said they're going to be sharing the word, they're going to be making calls, and I have all the support that they need to do this. And so I was thrilled at that beginning, even though you try to shut me out, I got the job done anyway. So that was the beginning of my day. And with that, I'm going to start with one of Martin Luther King's quotes. And he said, "True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice." And I think a lot of us need to remember that. We think if there's no tension, there's no violence, everybody's kumbaya, then we have justice. No, that's not justice. And so what we're looking for, the group of people that I work with and I'm dependent on and I believe in, we're working for true justice, not just the absence of tension. So with that, I want to start with a quick, maybe 30-second introduction of my speakers, and then we can get right into the program. Maddie, I don't know how you're going to conduct this, but well, we can start. People just, give it 30 seconds, something about yourself.
I can go. My name's Hope Metcalf. I have the honor of having worked with Barbara for many years now, and I teach a human rights clinic at Yale Law School, and I'm proud to support this campaign.
Thank you. I mean, I can go by my screen. Colleen?
Hi, everybody. I'm a huge supporter of the PROTECT Act and of all of these beautiful people I see on this screen in front of me who work tirelessly for the rights of those who are incarcerated and others. And I'm really thrilled and excited it's actually going to happen this year.
Thank you. Ann Massaro?
Hi, I'm Ann Massaro. I'm on the steering committee of Stop Solitary. And I would follow Barbara Fair anywhere in justice work. And we didn't do it last year because the governor vetoed it, but this year we're going to get it done.
Thank you. Gary?
Good evening, Gary Winfield, state legislator in the state senate, chair of the Judiciary Committee. So hopefully my committee will do what it's supposed to be doing, and we will get this bill on the floor and then on to the governor's desk.
Thank you. Robin?
Thank you, Queen Barbara. Yeah, that's what I call her. She is the queen matriarch of this movement in my eyes. Someone I love and adore. The tenacity and drive of this queen inspires me. So I am honored to be here this evening with you all to talk about the PROTECT Act. And Senator Winfield was being really humble. He did what he was supposed to do. He got out of the committee. We got it out of the House and the Senate. It went to the governor's office, and that's where it failed. So we do have work to do, but we will get it done because guess what? Teamwork makes the dream work. I chair Labor and Public Employees Committee, but I'm also honored to sit on the Judiciary Committee with Senator Winfield as well as the Appropriations Committee. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Michael Graham?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Michael Graham, and I'm formerly incarcerated. So the PROTECT Act, it strikes dear to my heart. And you know, being in this movement is a privilege and an honor behind Ms. Barbara Fair. I mean, I told her the first time I met her in person that I always saw her on the television while she was outside the prison picketing, or when she was outside of New Haven County Jail. So she's a icon and a hero behind the walls, even if she don't know it. So we definitely gonna get the PROTECT Act passed coming February. I'll be out there with you guys.
Thank you very much. Mel?
Hey y'all, Mel Medina. My pronouns are he, his. I'm a staff member at the National ACLU, but I come by way of the ACLU of Connecticut as I started out, and a Connecticut native. I'm thankful and honored to even be on this call. I fully agree that Barbara is the mother of the movement and has led this work for so many years that has provided space and path for activists to even find their place in this movement. I'm thankful to Hope and Maddie for their work at the Lowenstein Clinic and consistently, decade after decade, fighting on behalf of people who are incarcerated. I'm thankful to Senator Winfield and Representative Porter as the key legislators, people who have decision-making power and are proxy to power, that they use everything in their resources to ensure that our issues are always at the forefront. So thank you. And I'm thankful to Colleen and to Michael and to Tracy and others who are not just people who have direct experience, but that pain and understanding of what this system does to people that is so critically important to understanding why we need change, but also one of the biggest barriers to get the public to understand. So this is a human rights issue, and I'm so thankful that I'm even part of this conversation.
Thank you. David?
Thank you, Barbara. David McGuire, ACLU of Connecticut Executive Director, and I've been working with Barbara for well over a decade on this issue. And I really do feel like we're at the cusp of something major here, and I appreciate being involved at this event tonight. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. Tracy?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Barbara, for inviting me. I am somebody who is formerly incarcerated. I was incarcerated for 23 years. And as many of you on the call know, I was in solitary confinement for 7 years straight. So I am a huge advocate for oversight with DOC, as well as banning solitary confinement altogether. So we got to get this done. And I'm here tonight to not give my own voice, but to give a voice for some of the women that are inside of York CI. So I really appreciate you guys having me here. And the thing that I want to say is I thank you all, because when I was inside, I had no idea that there was this amount of amazing people out here fighting for us. So that's another, it's like, you guys are a lifeline. Without you, the people inside are going to continue to suffer. The people inside are going to continue to, go through things, and then they're going to come home. So you guys are like an amazing thing, and I appreciate you for just doing the work that you do.
Thank you. Hold on. Maddie?
Hi, I'm Maddie. I also work with the Lowenstein Clinic with Hope. As everyone else said, just absolutely honored to be here. The people on this call are incredibly inspiring to me in their work, and honored to support it in any way that I can.
Thank you. Ray? Ray Boyd?
I'm here.
Hi.
Hi, how's everybody doing?
Fine. Just a quick introduction.
Hello, my name is Ray Boyd. As some of you know that may be on the panel, I was just released from a term of incarceration. I served 29 and a half years of a 50-year sentence as a juvenile for a murder that I committed at the age of 17. I was just released on November 15th of last year.
Thank you, Ray. And I think we're waiting for one person to get in. Maddie, is that true? Pastor John Lewis?
Yes, that's right. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but I'm working on getting him the link right now.
Okay. And I have to say, before the pastor comes on, I am just so grateful to all you humble people. And I have to, and I say that earnestly. It's like you guys act like, you're not doing some very, very important work for a lot of people. And you are the shoulders that, they say I'm the mother of the movement. You are the shoulders I stand on. I could never do this by myself, especially having a son who has suffered all of these years under solitary. So to get me to the point where I don't allow that to paralyze me can only be done because I can stand on the shoulders of people like you to help me get it through it. So if we don't get John Lewis in, maybe we can just go ahead and get started. Because I know, 2.5 hours seems like a lot, but believe me, when you're talking about a topic like this, the time goes by so quickly. So I want to go ahead and at least get started. And I want to start with the shoulders I stand on. Hope Metcalf, David McGuire, and Mel Medina. I depend on them to bring this home for me. So we, either one of you can get started wherever you want to go. You already know the foundation of this. And I just have to ask that you just go ahead and get started.
Okay, I think maybe I'll start and then I'll leave it to David and Mel to finish up and hit points that I miss. Barb, you asked us to cover a few things. If there's anything we missed, and please let us know, and we can certainly go back. I'm just conscious of the time. So I guess one thing you asked, Barb, when you emailed us was to ask, why is it that we got involved in this work? Why do we stay engaged? And I want to just start there because I'm not somebody who has a personal experience with what we're talking about today. But nonetheless, I feel deeply implicated by what our state is doing. And the reason why I do the work is because people like Mr. Brown, Mr. Boyd, Ms. Bernardi are brave enough to speak up and demand justice from inside. And that's the only reason why this work is possible. And it's the reason why I both first became involved, because those folks were writing to David when he was still a staff attorney. This is 11 years ago now, and telling us about the horrors that were happening. And I know, Barbara, you have that experience too. And so it was, you know, how can you but respond if people are taking on the personal risk to expose themselves to harm for speaking out. And so it's with that spirit, and that's why I stay in it. And the reason, and what a win will be like to me, is when I can look my daughter in the face, she's 7 years old, and tell her she doesn't have to be ashamed to live in this state and pay taxes to a government that's doing what we're doing. One thing we wanted to cover is just to explain to folks who are wondering, why is it that what the governor did last year when we managed to pass the PROTECT Act and he signed a veto, but then in the same breath passed an executive order, why is that executive order not sufficient? And so I wanted to quickly cover that, especially to outline why it is that even though he talks about human rights and what are called the Nelson Mandela rules, which are a set of rules that were enacted about 5 years ago at the international level that set forth the minimum standards for the treatment of prisoners, why is it that we can still say that this governor and this state are not only not observing human rights, but they are violating them? And I want to make that very clear. So the first difference is that it's important to understand that an executive order is not binding. It is something that is done unilaterally at the whim of a governor, and it can be withdrawn at any point, whether by this governor or by any of his successors. Secondly, when it comes to isolation, the PROTECT Act was very clear. It set out clear limits for how long isolation could be used. It set out limits for why isolation could be used. And it was meant to be basically to limit it for the shortest time possible, and to have the default actually be that not only were we not trying to limit isolation, but actually to force the state to let people out of their cells. A little known fact is that not only is Connecticut engaging in solitary confinement in the sort of strictest sense of the word, which is restricting people to their cells for 20 or more hours a day, it is very commonplace in any maximum security facility that they are just keeping people in their cells for at least 20 hours a day. And that's just, as Barbara and others will talk about, it's a huge waste of human potential. It's also clearly against the spirit of the Mandela rules, which specify that incarceration itself is the punishment, period, full stop. So anything that happens in prison should always be for the purpose of rehabilitation. That's clearly what international law dictates, and that is not at all what we do in this state. And so it's from that very basic starting point that we come at this. So there are huge loopholes in the executive order in terms of how isolation is still permitted. It says that it only will happen for up to 15 days. That is not the case. We know that's not happening. It expressly says, except for lockdowns. We are seeing lockdowns happening for days at a time, regularly, on a weekly basis. And the other thing is it says that it doesn't apply if people are being put under what's called punitive segregation, in which case, I think what we're starting to see is that people are cycling in and out, and that's no surprise. It doesn't do anything meaningful at all in terms of mental health or programming to address the root causes of why some people might be experiencing behavioral or other issues in prison. So it is still a system that is going to make people worse, not better. And it is that paradigm that has not shifted whatsoever. It has no limits whatsoever on what are euphemistically called in-cell restraints, but what really means is chaining and shackling people down in locked cells. There is simply no justification for that treatment. It is plainly torture under international law. It happens all the time in DOC custody. And the governor has done nothing to redress that. And lastly, the other thing that international law makes very clear is that prisons are by their essence, places where torture can occur. And under international law, every state has an obligation not only not to torture, but to prevent torture. And how do you prevent torture? You prevent torture by bringing sunshine and light and air, meaning the public, in. And so oversight is one of the absolute essential pieces to ensure the humanity of a system. And this governor, by vetoing the bill, not only did nothing to address oversight, but in fact circumvented the democratic process. And it is really a shame, but the only thing that I can say is that it just lets us come back better and stronger, which is what we plan to do. So I think I'll leave it there. Happy to answer questions, and thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
Barbara, I could-
David.
Yeah,
I could.
Yeah, as always, Hope went above and beyond and really set out the playing field there. I mean, a couple things that I would say to add to that. One is that the reason that I'm in this work still after over a decade is because this particular practice in Connecticut really embodies the worst of what happens in our correction system. We have a correction system that really violates human rights on the daily and is really hardened, and under multiple forms of leadership have continued to be very resilient in going after people and hurting people. And solitary confinement is the worst of that practice. So in my mind, we need to, as a state, definitively end that practice. I believe that the culture really has shown an inability to reform itself. So we need, as a statewide law, to just outlaw this. And I want to give credit to you, Barbara, the folks at the Yale Clinic, and to Senator Winfield and Representative Porter for doing what really was a Herculean effort in getting that across the line this last year. I didn't think it was going to happen. If I was going to bet on it, I would have bet against you, even though we were pushing alongside you with smart justice. But you did get it across the line, and the governor did the cowardly thing and vetoed it with this, hollow and easily revoked executive order, of which they're not even following right now. So what I would say is that I'm someone that has been through this process many times, and I'm not an optimist. And I believe that this is the best chance this next session to really get some independent oversight through and force the governor to do the right thing. He's someone that doesn't have the natural instincts or humanity in his heart to do the right thing, but he is someone that wants to win re-election next year. So that is the reason why ACLU of Connecticut is behind you and will always be behind you. But I think there's a real chance to put the governor in a corner and make him do the right thing, even if he doesn't want to. I believe that there's a real awareness that's been built over the last few years, the legislature and amongst the public. You've gotten some reporters rather to really expose the inhumanity and the racial bias in the Department of Correction. And I think that we have a real opportunity here to get some huge strides that we've tried for a decade plus. So really, Hope has hit on the high points of it all. I think this is a real opportunity here, and I appreciate everyone continuing to push, in particular you, Barbara, for continuing to light that fire underneath the state of Connecticut to do the right thing and exposing the humanity in what they do. And I'll pass it over to Mel to bring it home.
Thank you.
I don't know what more to add. I think Hope and David covered a great deal. I think for folks that are either on this, watching this panel or watching in the future, I'll catch you up to what has happened in Connecticut. Last year, the legislature took on the discussion about whether or not we will treat 8,000 plus people who are in Connecticut prisons and jails as humans with respect and with dignity. And we won that conversation. We won that discussion. Senator Winfield and Representative Porter led a movement within the legislature, where the legislature spoke and said that there are bare minimums of standard of care that we need to be implementing in our prison systems, and that the prison system in and of itself cannot police itself and hold itself accountable. And therefore, external oversight is a primary requirement. That was a conversation that we won. I believe even one Republican have voted for that bill. It is incredibly rare, at least for this governor, to use veto power. He's only used it 4 times in his first term. One of those times is denying human rights and human dignity to incarcerated people. So that's the conversation that you're joining. We won the discussion about the moral obligation of the state to care for the people in its care. this governor decided to usurp democracy, to usurp the opinion and the leadership and expertise of legislators who worked with directly affected people and heard their stories, and decided to provide a half measure that not only does not ensure that human rights are protected, but does nothing to ensure that there is no torture. And so we still live in a state where potentially 8,000 plus people on any given day will experience torture at the hands of the Department of Corrections. And that's the fight that we're engaging in now. I agree with David. I feel optimistic. I feel strong about the work that it lies ahead, because we've already proven to legislators that this decision is not just crucial, but necessary for them to take on again and send this bill to the governor's desk. The public's role is to ensure that if Governor Lamont decides that he intends to veto this bill once again, after once again we win our moral fight through the legislature, that the public hold this governor accountable for denying the human rights and dignity of incarcerated people in Connecticut's prisons and jails.
Thank you. One other thing I wanted you to talk about a little before you go, Mel, because it's always going to come up when we talk about trying to get this work done, is the DOC is always going to ask for more money, more funding, more correctional officers. Can you talk a little bit about the incarcerated people versus staff ratio, and talk about it in a way that we understand? Do we need all the officers that we have, especially when so many of these facilities are locking people in their cells for most of the day anyway? So what is the purpose of so many correctional officers? And I want you to address that, because I know that's always going to come up. They're going to say, oh, this is going to take a lot of money. We need a lot more officers. But the reality is what?
Thank you for that question. And I'll answer it in two ways. I'll answer it first as the system should be, and then also answer why the PROTECT Act is important given the particular circumstances that we're under with a global pandemic. For folks who are unaware of the history of incarceration in Connecticut, just briefly, Connecticut reached its peak population in its prison systems by 2008. We were imprisoning over 20,000 people in Connecticut prisons and jails. Now, the history of incarceration in Connecticut mirrors the history of incarceration in this country. We were incarcerating Black and Latino primarily because of laws that targeted specific communities, using the criminal legal system rather than a public health model to actually make communities better. And so the arm of law enforcement, cops and prosecutors and judges and going to court, all was weaponized against our communities. So the communities that were experiencing, whether it be issues of addiction, whether it be issues of poverty, were year upon year being criminalized. And related to that, these same communities were divested from by our state legislatures in the past, obviously not the leadership that we have on this call. These were communities that were high needs. And so what happened in Connecticut's prison system is, despite the fact that Black and Latino people represent a minority within Connecticut's state population, we represented a majority in our state prisons, not because we were bad people or because our communities are inherently evil or anything like that, but simply because the social structure, our economic structure, and our criminal legal system marginalized us and left us vulnerable and was weaponized against us. Now, if that is true, which it is based on fact and based on data, what that also means is that what we've also experienced in the last 10 years is actually a movement of decarceration, led by the legislators that you see on this call, led by advocates and activists in the streets, organizing and protesting and pushing for the state to treat people better and with more humanity. We've improved our reentry systems. We've tried to get people to get back to work and tried to reunify families. And in doing so, we've actually dropped from our peak population of 20,000 plus people in Connecticut prisons and jails to what it is now at an all-time low, at least within the last 30 years, of below 8,000, or it's hovering around that number. But we've actually maintained the same total number of corrections officers since our peak, meaning the total number of people who are incarcerated in today's prison are being supervised by the same number of corrections officers at Connecticut's peak.
Yeah.
What that means is that Connecticut, despite decarcerating its prison systems, has doubled down on the system in and of itself. The primary cost of the prison system is personnel costs and overtime, hiring people to supervise an ever shrinking population. And so when people say, what do we do about the budget? The answers are simple: divest entirely from the system into the things that people need in their lives, in the communities where they come from. Now, that said, I'll speak to another reason why the PROTECT Act, especially at this moment, is needed now more than ever. It is also true that the Department of Corrections at the current moment, at any given moment, can be experiencing some form of a staff shortage due primarily to COVID-19. Now, there are two reasons for that. The first reason is there's a global pandemic and it's an incredibly infectious disease. But the second reason is that corrections officers have not done what is required to actually maintain and keep incarcerated people safe. We're finding that in terms of vaccinations, they're below 60% of their total CO population that are vaccinated, essentially putting incarcerated people at risks. And that lack of vaccination and that lack of care of a community, which runs counter to this idea that the correction system is in and of itself rehabilitative and actually caring of the people that it's charged to care for, that's resulting in shortages that result in the facilities going into lockdown and zero oversight. And so the question of whether or not people incarcerated today are experiencing mental health trauma, of course they are. Because we already know that in the general public, where the legislature will be having a conversation about kids and the experience of trauma that they're experiencing as a result of the global pandemic. Adults are talking to each other as colleagues, as when we go to work within our families, about the impact that this pandemic has done because we've been locked in our houses. But imagine being locked down in a cell. There is simply no oversight. No process by which incarcerated people can defend themselves from torture under the current regime of the Department of Corrections. And the PROTECT Act is needed now more than ever as a response to the global pandemic to ensure that incarcerated people are cared for. So I was a little long, but I wanted to make sure I covered both sides of the coin on that.
Thank you so much. You did an excellent job. Before I move on to the next person, though, I wanted to talk about, to have a little bit more talk about what the Mandela rules say, because this is what the governor used to veto the bill, to talk about the Mandela rules. Now, one of the first Mandela rules is prisoners must be treated with respect for their inherent dignity and value as human beings. Number two, torture or other ill treatment is prohibited. So if you're going to throw this Mandela rules stuff in here, you need to know what the Mandela rules say. And I want to read just a couple more. Mandela rules. Prisoners must be provided with nutritious food of wholesome quality and also drinking water. You want to throw in Mandela rules? Let's try to stick to those Mandela rules. Sleeping. Proper heating and ventilation, air, light, and minimum floor space must be provided without exception. That's a Mandela rule. Are we following that? So it's things like this that people are so ill-informed about, and that's why it was easy for them to believe that we are right in line with the Mandela rules, because you have to do the research, and that's what we do. When he wants to throw in Mandela rules, we go back and look at Mandela rules and say, wait a minute, is he following Mandela rules? Here's another one about searches. A search considered whether it's necessary and appropriate. Search procedures must respect the dignity and the privacy of the prisoner and not to be used to harass or intimidate. Whoa, wait a minute, didn't we say we're following Mandela rules? Okay, they must have slipped by that one. Solitary confinement. The rules stipulate that solitary confinement should only be used in exceptional, did you hear that? Exceptional cases, not as an everyday thing that we tend to do in Connecticut. It's a last resort and for as shortest time as possible. And then anyone who does happen to go into solitary, there should be an independent review. Indefinite and prolonged solitary is what they consider 15 days. Have we held people in solitary over 15 days? Okay, now. And we say we are following Mandela rules. I think somebody needs to look over Mandela rules again. And let's have them review that before they stick all of that in this executive order saying we're following the international law of Mandela rules, because we are clearly not following them. And I'll just start there. I'll stop there, and just so we can move on. So, like I said, this is to educate people who believe all of this malarkey that's thrown out here in the air at us, telling us, look what we're doing. We're doing some great stuff. In reality, we are far beyond, underneath any of the Mandela rules that they have. So we can start with that one. So next I want to talk to, let me see, because I want to try to follow this closely. We want to talk to, I guess they're just two of the men who've been recently released from prison. We'd like to talk to them about what impact they have seen from the executive order. And what's important to me about these two young men is that they've been in prison well before all of this isolating people and having people in cells 20, 23 hours a day as a norm. They know of a time when this was not happening. And so they can talk about what's different now. And also, while they're talking about it, when you look at where we are now, it makes you think about, how did we get here? How did we get here from when guys had hours at the beginning of the day, the afternoon, the evening, to do all kinds of things, to socialize, and now 22, 23 hours a day in a cell? How did we get here? So I want to hear from Mr. Ray Boyd, and then he can pass the mic to Michael Graham. Thank you guys both for being here.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Good evening, everyone. You wonder how we get here. Yeah, I remember early on during my term of incarceration, when I was at Summers and we used to go out to the yard. Summers is now Osborne, and we used to actually look at the construction of Northern being built, and everybody would wonder, like, what are they building this facility for? And lo and behold, they were building a facility for the worst of the worst. But at the time of the construction of the facility, you ask yourself, where were they housing the worst of the worst? Because they had to come up with these numbers of people to, facilitate that housing. So they had to create and design certain disciplinary rules that one would have to succumb to in order for them to be housed in this new facility that they were building. So over the years, you would see individuals, you would see new directives being implemented, and then you would see individuals succumbing to these new disciplinary rules that were put in place just so that they can fill that building up. And because without bodies, it wouldn't sustain itself. So over the years, I watched some of my peers, be railroaded with at disciplinary court, at DR court, as they would call it. You see some of the DR directors that were friends with the officers that are running the hearings, and they just finding you guilty because you have to have the bodies being shipped over there to fill up this building. So some years would pass, and eventually they would get a nice number over there, and then they would say, it don't have enough bodies over AS, or don't have bodies over there on death row. So now we have to, what we'll do is we'll shut down the units that house closed custody, and we'll send the closed custody inmates over there because it'll give us more room to work with. We'll fill up some more beds. That way we won't have to risk closing it down. And you would see young men coming through that were functionally literate, and they didn't know how to, coming into prison from a culture on the outside and not being able to defend yourself when you write a certain way or you talk a certain way, you were being railroaded into being a Blood or being a Crip. And most of these young men weren't even affiliated with these gangs. However, once you fell victim to this system that put you in a close custody, you had individuals that were not gang affiliated being housed with gang affiliated inmates. And before you know it, before they're a year or 18 months up in solitary confinement, they're entering general population gang affiliated by force because they wanted to survive and live through solitary confinement. So they had to succumb to two different disciplinarians. You had to fall victim to the system for railroading you and putting you in this predicament. And then you had a predatory behavior that was going on within this system that said, you know what, you either get down with us or you won't make it out of solitary confinement. And then when you get back in the general population, some of these individuals are in general population, and now they're forcing you to act in a certain manner that's not in accord with your nature. You just wanted to come to prison and do your time and get back out and be a viable citizen back in the community, but you fell victim to the system. So then you had them say, okay, we don't want these young men in here anymore. So now you have individuals like yourself to come forward and say, listen, what's taking place up there is not good. How do we rectify what's taking place up there? You have officers that we know that suits been settled of the treatments that's been going on up there. So that's not, you don't settle a lawsuit with anybody unless you feel as though your officers did them wrong, or you would go all the way. So we know that there's been some malicious behavior on behalf of the staff that's going on up in there, but it's been happening because it's allowed to happen. You have the individuals that have sued and settled, but those are the individuals that knew the law or knew that, if I filed something that, there will be a desired result behind my filings. What about the unsung heroes that we would say that went through there and kind of made it out? Because I always tell people the psychological warfare is war where there's no weapons. So all the psychological stuff that someone that was subjected to that environment had to go through is a strong individual to make it out unscathed, as they would say.
Thank you. Michael, can you talk also about what did the day look like before it got to the point that we were just warehousing and torturing people? What did the day look like? Because we're asking for a certain amount of time out of cell. And when I look back, I remember those things were already happening. They already had time in the morning, afternoon, and evening at some point. So what happened to that? You're muted. I mean, you got to unmute. Can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different answers that we can put to that, but I think monetizing prison when Connecticut kind of finally realized that they can really make some money, some people can make money off of prison, then things started to change a little bit, right? And I think it's also, certain events we're taking advantage of, right? Because, we have this and I forgot the name of it, but when, disasters or public crisis happen, then there's an opportunity to come with radical change that wouldn't be accepted under normal circumstances, right? And so I think the riots of the early 90s kind of gave the powers that be a little bit of wiggle room in that regard, right? And so I think my first time in the county jail, I remember the phone calls used to be like a regular collect call. You dial 0 and your person would either accept or not. And so, people would have the phone and we would be out for like 4 hours or whatever, and then people will go in and we know we'd be coming back out in like 45 minutes after the count. So that phone would be off the hook with the person on the other end knowing, come back to the phone in 45 minutes so we can talk. So that kind of gives you an idea of, and there wasn't any like, you know, fights over the phone at that time because people had enough time to come out of the cell and do whatever, right? You had guys in the gym. Gym was a big thing. Outside rec was a big thing. And then like Ray mentioned, when they started building places like Northern, right? And so this is when we started to see these changes. And when Ray was talking, I thought about something that, you know, personally happened to me. And I went to chronic discipline. I was in chronic discipline for, I think the whole ride was maybe 7 months, right? I think I went in April, May of 2001, but no, 2001. And I was there until October, like the end of October, because I remember that was the first time I went to Cheshire. I left from chronic and went to Cheshire, and it was November 1st was like the second day I was there. The rec yard was closing because they close it at that time every year. And so how I ended up in chronic because I had, like Ray said, if you incur a certain amount of DRs within a 90-day period, right? Three or more within a 90-day period, it triggers this like heightened sanctions period where now they can, you know, give you sanctions for a higher offense on a lower offense. And so that triggered me being eligible for what they call chronic discipline. And so, you know, we go through a hearing. I sit in segregation, which is, you know, solitary. I sit there for I think they made me do like 45 days on my sanctions because they bumped me up. And then now I'm in the process is what's called administrative detention. Now I'm waiting for them to give me the hearing, but I gotta wait in solitary for that hearing. It took 30 days for me to get that hearing. So now I'm there roughly 2 months. I get a hearing, surprise. We find you, you know, should be in chronic discipline. So you're gonna be going to chronic discipline. So now you're going on administrative detention pending transfer to chronic. So sit some more. Someday when I'm not expecting it, thinking about it, oh, Bram, come on, let's go. It's time to go. We go, wee hours in the morning. They drive me from Southern Connecticut to Northeastern Connecticut, way from Newtown or wherever Corey Garner is, Newtown, way up to Suffield, right? And then I start this process. I'm there first day there or first week there. You're in full restraints. You don't go anywhere without shackles and handcuffs on. So they come to the cell. You gotta, you know, put your hands through the slot, cuff up. They open the door, shackle your feet. I go to the shower. So now I'm in the shower and I'm thinking, like, how am I gonna pull this off? I got shackles on. So then you got some people that's veterans of this process. They teach me how to take my boxers off and push them through the shackles, and you know, so you learn all these crazy tricks, right? And you know, that's the first week. Second week, you're on partial restraint, so you get to come out in cuffs alone. And then, you know, we just gradually go until you make it out of there or you don't make it out of there, because you're there. You can incur infractions while you're there. And what's the next step from that? Administrative segregation, which is supposed to be worse, right? So yeah, it's not hard to get a lot of solitary confinement, because as you see, I've had infractions like disobeying a direct order, or right. I remember I rode on my sneakers one time. I had a state issued pair of white, like, think of boat shoes, right? And I drew a Nike emblem on the side. Officer saw that and said, okay, let me get those destruction of state property Class C ticket. That's on my resume of tickets. It's something that can get you sent to solitary, not alone, but with other tickets, right? And so, yeah, infractions aren't easy to get. You get infractions on the whim of an officer sometimes. I remember the first infraction I ever got was we were in Walker, and Walker was one of those places where, you know, it's Walker Reception Center Special Management Unit. So that's, you know, you want to have the worst of the worst there, and you're going to manage them. I was the worst of the worst. Why? Because my bond was high, not because of anything else. Had a high bond. You go to Walker, and you got to deal with Walker rules. So long story short, they let us out at roughly 8 o'clock at night. I was a guy that liked to watch a certain show at 8 o'clock at night on a certain day or whatever. They let you out. I want to make my instant oatmeal. So I run down and get some hot water. I get the hot water and I run back upstairs. By that time, the guard is at my door, closing my door. So I'm like, okay, you know, officer, I want to go in. So he has to give me read me the riot act about something. And I was like, okay, well, I just want to go in and sell. Well, no, this is what he says to me. He says, because here's a big, one of the things I noticed a lot about the sadistic officers, right? It's the opposite of what you want is what you're going to get just because, right? And so he says, if I open the door, you're going to have to go in there and you're going to have to lock up. You're going to have to stay in. But he didn't expect that I was intending to go in and go watch my television program, right? And so once I told him that, yes, that's what I want to do, he says, no, go down to the day room. And then so, you know, maybe I might have said something under my breath walking away. I got an infraction for that, right?
Yeah.
So that's the type of thing that happens where abuse under abuse, right?
Yeah.
Because we talk about oversight. Somebody mentioned oversight earlier. I think it was Attorney Metcalf. And oversight is needed in the DOC because every bad thing that you can think of that happens in this DOC is due to a lack of oversight, right? Because there's checks and balances everywhere. It's a bureaucracy, right? There's somebody at every step of the ladder to be able to check the procedures, right? Or what's going on a day-to-day basis, right? That's what they got, logbooks that log every activity in and out of a unit, right? And so
collect call from
yeah, so this is the type of thing that answer that for me.
We're gonna have to move on anyway. So
yeah,
thank you so much, Mike.
But did I answer your question? You said you wanted to know how things change. So
right,
there was certainly more time out of the cell, right? And like one of the things I noticed in the end of my incarceration when I was leaving, right? We had I used to go to Juma services on Friday, right? And so they locked the facility down so much. They locked the facility down so much that in order to talk to people, for people to talk to one another as friends, they would sign up for religious services just to be able to see somebody or just to be able to get out of the cell, because religious services is held at a time when everybody's locked up.
Yeah.
So to get out, they sign up for services. This causes a problem because why? People who really want to go and worship their Lord have to be disrespected by people who are whispering and talking to their friends, right? But it's a situation that the system created by keeping them locked up, right? I remember years before they used to have like card games and something time, right? And so you would go down to the school building for 2-3 hours. They had Monopoly, they had cards, they had Uno, they had whatever. But it was an opportunity for guys to be able to get out, talk, and unwind or decompress or whatever, right? And so that was a time. That's a difference.
These are all the kind of things they took away from people.
That they took away that, and now you can see where that need is, because you got guys sitting in the cell either deteriorating mentally, or you have guys doing things just to get just a little respite from the cell. They're going somewhere where is an atheist. He doesn't even care, like doesn't believe God or whatever, or even has base opinions on people who do worship God, but they're in this service just to get out of the cell.
Yeah.
Right. So it's desperation.
Thank you, Michael, for providing all that information. I want to keep the program moving, so I want to bring Tracy up for a few minutes, and we got to be mindful of time now because it's 6 o'clock. I want to bring her up to give some voice to the women in York, because we have people up here, men who talked about the situation in the male facilities. And so is there, what they're talking about, is that similar to female, what they're going through? And then while you're at it, if you can just, I know you are very closely connected to women in prison, and you had sent me something that one woman wrote, and if you could just talk about the situation she said is going on in New York now, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
So it's funny because most people think that a women's prison, they're more gentler with us. They treat you different. And I'm sure on some aspects they do, but I think that the abuse is a lot worse in the women's prison, because in most instances, the men will stand up for themselves where women won't. We just take it and a lot of times turn it internally. And it's true. See, the thing that everyone needs to understand is that the word solitary confinement it's solitary confinement, but Connecticut prisons, they mask that word. They say it's closed custody. They say it's a administrative detention. They say it's all of those things. There's all different levels of what solitary confinement is. And the sad thing about it is, like you said, the Mandela laws and stuff, about when they do searches and stuff, they can do searches at a whim. And I know I wasn't incarcerated for a while, but when I was there, the warden lost her coffee cup, and they searched all of us. They strip searched us. They looked in our bodies, our cabin, like our whole bodies. Like it was the most degrading thing. And so I don't think that they're ever very careful about when they strip search. And but I want to say that right now during COVID, people are actually, everybody is on solitary confinement, right? Even though they're not being punished, they're all on solitary confinement. And you say, well, they need to do a certain protocol in order for, people to keep us safe. But I'm getting reports from women inside that are saying, okay, they have us on this lockdown where everybody's still getting sick because, they're doing things like people when there's a methadone program, and the women that go to the methadone program, although they're keeping all the units separate, right? And everything else, they're feeding back in the cells. They're not letting them go out for anything. They're not letting clean up between the phones. The phones are not being cleaned between uses. They're not letting, one of the girls said that they try to clean the railings on the stairs on the way down to get chow, where everybody touches to get the chow in the common area, because they serve it at the tables in the common area. You get a tray and you bring it back to your cell. And when they do this, they're not letting them clean the railings. They're not letting them clean properly. 2 women said that the majority of the time they're not wearing their masks, that they're mixing when they're doing the methadone program in it's called A&D. It's like an admissions unit. They're bringing all the units together and they're locking them all together. So then girls that are women that are coming back from this are bringing COVID back to the unit because they're mixing. They're not letting them have education. Their education is in a basket. They do their work. A teacher comes to the unit. They put it in a basket in the unit. So people are feeling very isolated, the whole compound. And it's like, here we are trying to stop solitary confinement. And here it is, there's excuses to confine people even further and then not keep them safe. They said that one of the things they said is, if you're asking for mental health and you're asking for, obviously they've been locked down for about a month, 2 months now, I think, at York. And I definitely know they were locked down for Christmas. and they're asking for mental health, and they're being degraded in the process by needing to tell them why they need to talk to someone, because they want you to say you have to, at York CI, I know for a fact, because I was somebody that was very suicidal throughout my incarceration. They want you to tell them that you're going to kill yourself. And if you tell them that you're going to kill yourself, there's a whole process to go through. But if you don't say that you're not safe, you know, if you don't say, I don't feel safe, this is what I always taught everyone to say, I don't feel safe, because then you're not exactly saying you're going to kill yourself, but they need to have you see someone. Whether it's from me, from someone else, whether it's from myself, some reason I'm telling you I don't feel safe. But what the guards are doing is they're badgering people into telling them why they don't feel safe, which is putting people to go right back up to their rooms. And when I was there, and that actually happened with a young lady, they told her to go back to her room because she didn't want to tell them that she was suicidal, because she didn't want the handcuffs and everything that goes along with them thinking that you're suicidal. And she went back up to her room and she killed herself. And, you know, these are things that are all on record. And it's just, to me, like, they're scared inside. They're scared. They don't want to get it. They see staff that's not wearing their masks, or that's wearing their mask over their face and their nose out. And they know that the staff is going home with their families and, you know, coming back in and out, and they're scared. These women, they, you know, none of these people are sentenced to death, and too many people are getting the death sentence while they're incarcerated because protocol is not being followed. So I just want to say that I so appreciate you guys. And yeah, I feel this is near and dear to my heart as somebody that survived it. And you don't survive it unscathed. You know, I have severe post-traumatic stress. I have anxiety attacks. Although I speak in the public light on a regular occasion and as much as I can, that is a way for me to not lose my mind, knowing that I left people inside and this treachery is happening. You know, so we have to keep speaking out, and we have to keep speaking up. I personally spoke to Ned Lamont, and I talked to him prior to all of this about what solitary confinement was. He told me that he believed in people, not prison. And then to do this, I mean, it was the worst thing that you can do when, you know, the House and the Senate thought that we need this oversight. We need to stop torturing our people that are going to come back into our society. And for him to say no, to me, was a smack in my face. It was like, he really doesn't care about human beings, because most of these people that are incarcerated, I believe it's like 80% are parents. So that means they're going to come home to their sons and daughters. And do you want them to come home in a mental state that's better? Or do you want them to come home in a mental state that's worse? I mean, you have to decide what kind of society you want and why. Is it because you want votes? You know, and so thank you. I appreciate you. I know a lot of people have to talk. And I just really, really hope that everyone out there fights for this bill and fights for the people inside, because they matter. They're human beings that have family and mothers and fathers and family that are looking forward to them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tracy. One of the things that really struck me when you were talking is, because I know it to be true as a clinical social worker and as a parent, is that many people come out and you think they've been unscathed. They look wonderfully, they present well, but inside is a whole different story. And I remember that from Khalif Browder. I was going to watch his movie, and it hit home so close. I've never been able to watch that movie, but I've never forgot that part that he said, when I came home, I smiled and everything, and everybody thought I was fine. And then the next thing he said was, inside I was a mess, and then he killed himself. So these are the things that concern me, that people are coming home in these conditions, crushed, broken, but they present well, so everybody thinks everything's fine, and they don't see the importance of why we have to stop this psychological torture of these people. And not only adults, but when we think about, we have young kids and Manson youth, and we're doing the exact same thing to them. And then they come home, they act up, and then we look at them and call them bad kids. But what about what happened to them? We don't want to talk about what happened to him, because many times a lot of us are paid, we know we played a role in that, because we were silent. And when we're silent, we're letting this system do what it wants to do to our kids. And so our role is to stand up and do something. And so that reminds me of another quote that I wanted to say just before I talk to our legislators and just hear from them what it is we have to do, because to pass the bill, to work so hard to pass the bill and to be excited just waiting for the signage. And then this one man can just, with the stroke of a pen, just shut all our voices out. So what can we do differently, legislators? We're calling on you. We need to know, what can we do differently this time to make sure that Ned Lamont pays attention and respects the people? And the quote I wanted to say before I call on Robin and Gary is, an individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his own individuality and have concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. That's something that really resonates to me. My son was, well, still is a victim of what has happened, but I had to rise above my own pain, my own trauma, because it didn't just hurt him, it hurts our entire family. But I had to rise above that so I can take care of the broader concerns of our humanity, this next generation of kids who will suffer the same thing that my son suffered. I have to pay attention to that. I can't be paralyzed by my own pain. And so that's why this quote really resonates with me. We have to rise above our own individual concerns and think about the broader humanity. So with that, I'm going to call on Robin Porter and Gary Winfield to just, help us. We need help. We need to know, how do we get this man to sign this bill after we've done so much hard work to get it passed? You want to go first? Gary, I know you had to go somewhere, so now that you're back, I don't want to lose you again.
Yeah, Robin, you want to go first? Because I'm texting somebody. You go first and I'll jump right in right after you.
What was the question, Ms. Barbara? Because I was anticipating the senator.
We need help. We need to know, what do we need to do when we do all this hard work, legislators vote on it, and how one man can, with the stroke of his pen, just eliminate everything, and then another man can say, we're not even going to have our overrides. It's gone. I talked to quite a few legislators lately, asking that question. I want to know, what can we do differently? We need your support, whatever it takes. We need it. I'm going to tell you how I'm feeling right now. I think it's time to put the mice traps down in the Capitol and the LOB, because we have to separate the men from the mice, because that's the only way we're going to get this done. We must do that. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Robin. And the question again is, what can we do? Help us.
So first, I don't think it's a question of whether your strategy worked or did not work, right? The work that you did clearly got you to what should have been the finish line, right? So, the governor functions a lot different than the legislature. It is one individual. That individual's individual perspective has a lot to do with whether or not at that level you will pass or not. So I just want to start off there, right? Because I think I've heard from a lot of people this kind of "what did we do wrong" thing. I just don't think you did anything wrong. It's the first thing. I do think that knowing that the governor has a perspective that doesn't align with ours, there are questions to ask about how do you make it more likely that he will sign the bill, right? That's a different question. When I'm listening to the conversation going on tonight, what I'm hearing doesn't line up with what the narrative tends to be on this issue publicly, right? So I'm hearing a lot of stories of human beings, right, where the humanity of people are recognized. Even at this point in the conversation, that's not the way this is normally talked about. And so I think part of the conversation is not only what pressure do you bring to bear in terms of the numbers of people who are coming from different districts, talking to various legislators and the governor, but how are you helping to continue to change the narrative to be a narrative of an issue of humanity and bringing that more to the forefront than the issue itself is important, right? Like we want to ban the usage of solitary, all of that, but the why you're doing that, I think, and that humanity question is critical here. So that when any of us make a decision, the context in which we make the decision is the context that if we do not do this, what we are therefore doing is not recognizing the humanity of the people inside of our systems. If we do not do this, what we are therefore doing is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I want to say something else about changing the narrative, because I think we have often talked about what happens to the people. Well, we don't talk enough about this, but we do talk about what happens to people when they go in the system and come back to our communities. We have to, I think we also have to talk about who people are when they hit the system, right? So, you know, the system is going to do a lot of damage, but oftentimes people are already damaged and have experienced trauma before they've hit that system. Now, you introduce a person who's already had trauma that is untreated, probably unrecognized in their life, to a space where they're going to get nothing more than trauma, and they cannot remove themselves from that space. You have a major problem. A major problem. And I think it's important for us to talk about it this way, because we speak about these practices as if they enhance public safety. These practices not only do not enhance public safety, they decrease it, and they decrease it disproportionately in certain communities, right? And so that whole conversation that we do have, but not enough, I think is critical to, particularly, let's be real, it's an election year, particularly in an election year, is important to have, so that when a decision is made, it is clear where you stand. Because the governor vetoed the bill and then talked about the Mandela rules and all of this stuff. And I think to the general public, it's like, well, that makes sense, right? Right? Because there's no public context against which the things he said get weighed. We have to change that. And I think when you do that, look, ultimately it doesn't matter what you could do. He could veto the bill, but you want it to be the case that if he vetoes the bill, it is highly problematic, particularly in the year that we're in.
Thank you. Robin, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot, all of what Senator Winfield just said. I mean, at the end of the day, it really is about, you know, just having the ability to figure out how you hold people's feet to the fire when they've learned how to dance in the fire, right? So we have to come up with a strategy that says, Gary was talking about election year. For us, this is a very finite year, right? Everybody's concerned about being reelected. And that's been the confusing part for me, because this is a great bill. This would be a great piece of legislation to run on. So
yes,
why aren't we passing it? There has been pressure, you know, and I saw in the Q&A, someone was saying Lamont caved the pressure from CO Union, threatened to strike. What's the strategy here? I believe that has to be a core, you know, at the center of this conversation, because unions carry a lot of power. So we need to educate the union. We need to talk to these union members. One of the big things that he brought to the table was, you know, and the union brought to the table was that it would make the prisons less safe. And there is actually, you know, data to support that is not true. You know, they believe solitary confinement is necessary to ensure safety. And that was pretty much, you know, what Governor Lamont was saying, came out of his conversations with the correction office union. But there's an example in Colorado. The state reduced its use of solitary by 85%. And guess what? Assaults on staff are at their lowest point since 2006. So that kind of debunks that. And then let's talk about what was mentioned earlier. These people are put into solitary confinement, and then they have to come home. So it doesn't lead to safer communities. It is actually a public safety issue that is birthed out of the practice of solitary confinement. People that have been in solitary confinement, and not all of them, because you know we do have exceptions, two on this call, 3. Let me not leave Tracy out. But they are more prone to come home and commit crimes. Many of them are prone to come home with mental health issues that they didn't necessarily have going in. There are urban traumas that we all are impacted by just because of the community we come from. We carry that baggage. But to go in and have that exacerbated unnecessarily, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, we can't argue the fact, even the federal government has said, even the UN has said that this is torture. It is inhumane and it is ineffective. So we have to educate the public, our constituency, and the members of this state overall. I mean, like, we really need to educate people because, like Gary said, you say that and it sounds good because you really don't know what he's talking about. And he's the governor. And there's a level of prestige that comes with that as well. So, you know, if you're not familiar and you have a governor standing before you, you're going to believe what the governor's saying. And that's why it's important as leaders in communities and elected officials, we're careful about where we stand, because just simply by standing there validates that thing. So I think we have to go back to making sure that people are educated. They understand what solitary confinement is. They understand the impact, the negative impacts of solitary confinement that are supported by, you know, the data and the research. It's not just anecdotal. This stuff is real, and there are definitely numbers to support why we should not be doing this.
I would just jump it back in for a second and say, so last session, one of the things that was amazing about the session was the work done around this and clean slate. That work where as legislators came to the building, they had to face these issues, right? One of, not my place to tell you a strategy, but one of the things I think needs to happen is that should continue, but the focus should be less on getting to legislators who heard you all of last session, who you know where they line up, and getting to the people who get to those legislators from their district, right? Because they know, they heard you. There's nobody in that building, nobody who didn't hear from you all, who hasn't heard the stories. Wherever they are, we can probably move some people. I'm not saying we can't, but the focus should be on getting to those who these people have to face at the end of the year. Right? So that those people can get to them and say, you may say you represent me, but you're not. Right. And that does have impact. I've seen it in the past work on even people I didn't, you know, somebody comes to you and says, hey, these people came to me from my district, and I look at them and go, I'm glad to have you, but I never expected to see you. Right? So I think strategically that's a place where we should be focused more. And I mean, we have allies that have huge networks, right? So we should be exploiting those networks to their fullest.
Thank you. With that, this is a little out of order, the order that I had, but because you made that statement, I wanted to bring up someone who has come up with a strategy that I'm hoping will move some Republicans, which we know they're hard to move. But maybe hearing from another Republican might move them. And so I'm gonna, and the letter she sent out to them, they have it already. It's gonna go to Democrats also, because we know they're not, everybody who said they're with us doesn't mean that they're Democrats are all with us. So it's gonna go to Democrats, but more importantly, it's gonna go to Republicans, which are the people that I know we have to move a lot more of them. And so I'm gonna bring up Ann Massaro to just read in the letter that she sent out to Republicans on this issue. And just before she comes up, I have to tell you, I met her husband before he passed away, and I seen the transformation in him. When I first used to go to Ann's house, I was a nervous wreck. I always tried to be outside. He just didn't make me comfortable about being in the house. A lot of that changed. Our relationship, Ann can tell you, became so much better. But the transformation that I see is this elder white man, long time, I guess lifetime Republican. And we clearly, I know Ann will say he's racist. But yet I seen him come to our hearing, our public hearing, and said, this is something I don't want done in my name. And so watching that transformation, and knowing that the best thing that Ann can do for him right now to honor him is to make sure that she continues to work on those Republicans. And so I'm just going to give it to her. If she could just read the letter that she sent to the Republicans from her husband.
Thanks, Barb. I've been an activist for racial and social justice my whole life, starting with the Southern Freedom Movement. And I fell in love with this man who had a heart that was great, and he, toward the end of his life, with the work that I did and the conversations we would have, I believe in redemption, and I saw it in him. And I just want to share the letter that I just sent to all the Republican legislators. Dear, last year, my husband, Michael Massaro, testified before the Connecticut State Judiciary Committee in support of Senate Bill 1059, the PROTECT Act. Michael was a lifelong Republican, a business owner, and a lifetime resident of Connecticut. He testified that he believed that solitary confinement or extreme isolation, by whatever name it's called, is torture. He said that his humanity would not allow him to support solitary confinement, and that he did not want his tax dollars being spent on torturing other human beings. He went on to say that the issue of solitary confinement is not a political issue, but a humanitarian issue. Michael told a story which he kept private until his testimony before the judiciary. He said, "If you think this cannot happen to you or your loved ones, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. My daughter was incarcerated and spent time in solitary confinement. After 3 years of being on the inside, she only recently has found her voice to speak about the horror. Her experience in solitary confinement caused her great psychological harm from which she may never recover." He went on to say that prison conditions are inhumane, and extreme isolation is the worst and most harmful. Michael passed away this November without ever seeing Senate Bill 1059 passed into law because of Governor Ned Lamont's veto. The governor told the people of Connecticut no, even though the bill passed bipartisan in both houses. If Senate Bill 1059 had become law, it would have ended the torture his daughter experienced and many other parents' children are continued to be subjected to. You have another chance to touch your own humanity and make my husband's testimony mean something by passing the PROTECT Act 2022 in this coming session. I am writing to you in honor of Michael's memory. If he saw beyond the politics of this issue and touched his own humanity by understanding this is not a political issue, my hope is that you can too touch your own humanity and vote to support the PROTECT Act 2022. So that's a note of hope and redemption.
Thank you so much, Ann.
Thanks, Barb.
I tell you, I only knew Michael for a short period of time, but he made such an impression on my life. Like I said, when I first started going there, I'd always hang outside. I didn't feel comfortable in the house. But toward the end, Michael would make soup for me because he a low sodium. And so he would make sure he said, make sure Barb is coming, that we got some soup for her. So, this is the man that I lost also. So I just want to stop there before I start breaking down. But when I saw the transformation in this man, I know that there's hope for others. And so I'm hoping that Ann's letter will touch some of the hearts of those Republicans who can't see beyond politics and help support this bill. So moving on, I want to bring up Colleen Lord, a mother who knows the firsthand the harms of solitary confinement. And she is now working on a project to help professionalize correctional officers. And I'm hoping it works, because nothing bothers me more than when we talk about this issue and then people will say, well, I was just doing my job. That just, people have to stop trying to excuse the inexcusable. You can't just sit back and do these things and not say anything and say, well, I'm just doing my job, because not when your job means hurting other people, and sometime for a lifetime. So I'm going to turn it over to Colleen right now.
Thanks, Barbara.
Mhm.
I was really touched by everyone's testimony and words. Mr. Boyd said, it's happening because it's allowed to happen.
Mhm.
And that really drove home for me because of what happened to my son. And I hope you forgive me if I'm gonna just read a statement about it, because it's easier for me to just not break down so much. It's a hard story to tell, but it illustrates what happens behind locked doors. 1,033 days ago, my beautiful and gentle son, Robbie, who you see in the picture behind me in the red, he's the gentle giant. He became a homicide victim in New Haven, Connecticut. But this homicide was not on the streets. It was inside the Whaley Avenue jail at the hands of correction officers who were inconvenienced when my son was sick, harmless, and lying down in the shower. Robbie was federally recognized as disabled and yet brutally abused, incarcerated for nonviolent breach of peace because no hospital beds were available when a judge told him he needed to be in a hospital for 3 months. So he ended up in jail instead. Ex-Lieutenant Carlos Padro was convicted of third-degree assault for his initial cruel stomp on my son's face, but no charges for his homicide, despite Padro spraying directly into my son's face 6 times the chemical agent allowed, despite severe respiratory illness tests on record at the DOC. And he ordered and applied life-threatening restraints, including while placing Robbie prone with several officers on his back. The DOC readily admits their documents checking the solitary confinement cells were falsified to the state police and state's attorney. There's still no accountability. My son, who never hurt anyone, was tortured and left to die alone in a solitary cell, a cell that should only be used in extremely limited and regulated circumstances. The PROTECT Act provides for oversight and transparency. An ombuds office could have been reviewing policy and abuses for 10 years before my son was killed, and it could have stopped this rampant and reckless disregard for the lives in the DOC care. Instead, I'm 90 million seconds without my Robbie bear, a nightmare that will go on forever. And I would like to remind everyone that the privilege that I was born with prevented me from ever imagining this happening to me, that my son's last words would be, "Can't breathe," underneath the weight of all of these officers, with his hands tied and his feet tied and a chain connecting them, cutting into his belly. After being overdosed with chemical agent, he was left alone to die in a solitary confinement cell. But I have learned in the last 2.5 years that many of my friends of color for their whole lives have imagined this exact thing happening. They're already painfully aware that the majority of the victims of solitary confinement and chemical agent torture are there because of the color of their skin. So I have to keep telling his story because that just adds an extreme amount of insult to injury, in my opinion. The correction officers need training, and it's provided for in the PROTECT Act. They need to recognize signs of mental illness and the effects of psych meds. They need to understand the consequences of untreated mental illness, for this is why half of the incarcerated are there to begin with. And if they weren't sick when they got there, then unchecked abuse will ensure that they're sick when they get out. It's inhumane, and this is why we need the PROTECT Act. Now, Barb referred to a project I've been working on. It was begun by the NAMI Shoreline Group, and specifically Denise Pally, who is on the call, a wonderful advocate. And we're working with an organization called Cable, who trains thousands and thousands of law enforcement officers, and working with them to adapt their training to DOC staff. I believe that when the PROTECT Act is passed and signed, that we need to hit the ground running and have training ready to go and in place. And we've been working with Mike Fumiati and others from Cable and NAMI, and we're right now still in the beginning stages, trying to make sure we're aligned with what other states are doing, what efforts like Stop Solitary is doing, and the Police Accountability Task Force is doing, and the Connecticut Bar Task Force. Lots of people are working on this at once. And it's just going to be good to be in line for strategy purposes. But the things that I mentioned are already in the PROTECT Act. So we just want to be ready with the training ready to go as soon as this is signed into law. I think that training begets compassion. And as Robin was saying, educate, educate, educate. The information that the governor was given was wrong. And we can educate him otherwise and ensure that this gets passed this time around. I just want to say one last thing about what happened last summer in the House. There was one representative, and she was claiming that the victims' families were not being listened to, and that this bill was some kind of affront to the families of victims. Well, I want to make clear that I am a victim's family. My son was a victim of homicide, and I do not want the people who killed him to be tortured in jail with no transparency. I want there to be accountability and steps taken so that it doesn't happen again. And I believe so much in the PROTECT Act that it will prevent the suffering that my son experienced, as well as what so many millions of others are across the country. I really think that it can be expanded upon in other states. I just think it's that groundbreaking of a bill. So I want to thank Barb again for letting me speak and tell my son's story. If it can help anyone to suffer less or have their lives saved, then I've said this before, then I'll feel like his death wasn't for nothing, though I will never recover from his death. This is the one thing that will give me some measure of peace. So thank you again to all of you who work so hard on this. It really means a lot to me. And to everyone on this call, I just think you're amazing.
Thank you, Colleen. I just wanted to mention something that, like you were talking about a program that you were working on, and I wanted to mention this program that they have. Supposedly it's a Yukon experiment that's been going on for a while. It's called High Tech. It's supposed to be a program that they're claiming has improved how correctional officers are improving conditions inside of the prisons, around their safety. And so you might want to connect with Senator Kathy Olston, because it's one of those things that she has supported a lot. And again, the program is HITEC. It stands for Health Improvement Through Employee Control. And it was a federally funded program for years, and now they want to make it a state program. But according to Kathy's own words, she said it's a great program that has had a huge amount of success dealing with mental health, sleep deprivation related to shift work, issues relating to diabetes and hypertension, and the stresses of the job at hand. So that might be another thing that while you are working on this, that maybe you give her a call and connect on something that's already in place, and maybe working together, you can strengthen it to really work for the safety of all the people inside the prison. Because one of the narratives that continues to be used at all times whenever we try to bring any changes in this system is everything is done for safety and security. All the degrading strip searches, all about security and safety. And the reality is, who are we making safe and secure and treating people the way that they do? So thank you, Colleen, for coming on and talking about that. I see the night's getting a little late, and I do want to leave some time for questions, but I don't know if, oh yeah, Corey's here. I wanted to get a word from some of our supporting organizations about giving their public support to the work that we're doing. So I want to start with Corey Betts from NAACP in Connecticut, and then I want to bring up Pastor John Lewis, who is part of Connect, to talk about you're lending your support to what we're doing, and why do you think it's important that NAACP and churches are some of the greatest supporters in this work, or should be at least.
Good evening and happy Martin Luther King Day. This is very, very important, and I think imperative to what this initiative stands for: stop solitary confinement, right? And again, my name is Corey Betts. I am a member of the NAACP. I'm here on behalf of Scott Exdale, our state conference president. And when we talk about solitary confinement and the constraints that we have had, nationally, not just with the criminal justice system, but the constraints we have had as Black and brown individuals in our nation, I think this initiative is very important to stop, how and what this has done to those individuals who have been confined and in solitary confinement, and understanding what does that create and how does that help even after those individuals have come home from being incarcerated, right? So the importance of making sure that we stop this so that we can even stop the recidivism and the things that, would cause an individual to go back to being incarcerated. So again, I'm here in full support. We're here in full support on stop solitary confinement. We've been here supporting this initiative and believe that it's very important that, this bill is passed so that individuals don't have to continue to be confined in those places. So again, thanks. And we're here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we hear something from Pastor John Lewis? He's part of the Connect, which is well, he can explain a little bit what that all is, but I just have to give him a special shout out, because for years that I'm doing this work, trying to get in churches and trying to educate and motivate congregations where I know people who've suffered and continue to suffer are sitting in those churches, and how to motivate them to become a part of this. And the one thing I can say about Pastor John Lewis is I have never asked, not one time, will you come to an event? Will you speak at an event? Will you come to a protest? Will you let me use your church? He's always said yes. So, there's those who talk the Christian life, and then there's those who live it. And as far as I'm concerned, Pastor John Lewis lives it. And so I just want to give him an opportunity to talk about why they think the religious community should be a big part of this, and being a part of Connect, how they're planning to lend their hand to getting this bill signed. Thank you, Pastor Lewis.
Thank you, Barbara. Again, I commend you on the work that you're doing. I commend everyone up here of the work that's being done, especially Brother Ray and Brother Michael. Commend you both for just taking that moment to really express what's going on and the things that are happening. And thank you so much for sharing that letter. These are the things that are important, and Colleen, that is so important. Even what you were saying about your son, everyone, Senator Winfield and Robin and all of that, all us, our state reps and Corey. Thank you, of course, and everybody that's up here. It is so important that we consistently continue on to do what we're doing. But what Barbara didn't tell y'all, if I didn't do what she asked me to do, there was going to be a problem. See, y'all didn't know that part. See, so she makes it seem like, she don't put nothing. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
That's not true.
I'm excited about always supporting Barbara because there's so many things that, again, she takes to heart. It's not just about what happens to her children. It's about what's happening to other people's children. And that's what it's all about. And Connect, I got involved with Connect about 1.5 years ago, the church. I definitely signed the church up with it. There's probably someone that can speak way more than I could about Connect. But the thing that made me interested in Connect, because it's a group of churches and organizations that unite together to address issues such as solitary confinement and other things, that they will come together collectively as one voice, and they will address the issue. And they have made differences in so many different places, addressing issues that were not justified in so many ways. And that's what made me want to be a part of Connect. I just know that without our unity, without us coming together, without the churches and the religious organizations being able to come together, that's what's going to make Lamont do what he needs to do. That's what's going to make your government officials and your leaders, because we the people that put him and them in that position will make them hold to what it is that we want. The reason why a lot of them won't, or he feels that he can sign that or veto that, because he don't see nothing coming his way. He really doesn't see anything that's going to challenge him from not doing that. He doesn't see a threat to his position. You see, so these are the things that we really have to bring to the table. Numbers matter. And when we let these officials know that life matters, that humanity matters, these young men that was up here talking about the experience in prison. I went to prison back in I think it was in the 80s or 70s. I was the first one to get caught with a gun in school. And then I went and they made an example out of me, because that's when a teacher got killed at Cross. And I spent like about 8 months up in Cheshire. And you ain't had to worry about me going back. That's what I do know. But my point is that in that time, it was about reform.
Right.
In that time, they had things that was going to help you be a better person. They had different recreational stuff, educational stuff. So when you come back, you will not traumatize or be a problem in your society. But let's talk about the elephant in the room here. You see, the reality of it is money. Follow the money. Follow the money. Prison is big business. And so anything that comes against being able to keep people from coming to prison or breaking down them in such a way that they don't know how to survive out there, and you can count on them coming back to prison, is big business. It is big business. But when the people in the community, when the legislators, that we begin to really address and let them know that we are serious about what we're doing. I just got off a Zoom earlier to talk about Dr. King, and people might have different opinions about Dr. King, and nobody's perfect. I get it. But one of the things that I said is that Dr. King didn't die for the moment and for the day that he lived in. He died for the future. And what we have to understand, we have to do this selflessly. We have to put this work in, even though in our time that we may not see it in our lifetime, but we are willing to put the work in, knowing that we are part of the change that is so necessary. It is inhumane. People go to prison, they're doing their time. They did the crime, they're doing their time. Solitary confinement allows laziness of correctional officers for them not doing their job. The correctional officers back then, they engaged with you in a certain degree. They was not just making it just a manning you like you some kind of animal. They had to engage with you one way or the other. They had conversations with you sometime. And those are the little things that really made the difference. So when you put a person in solitary confinement and you're not even being concerned about the mental state of that individual, I just like to say, if it was your son or your daughter, how would you feel about that? And before I leave here, the pandemic is opening up people's eyes, and let's really talk about that, because see, people get a taste of what it's like for them not to be in public, or for them to be restricted. It's not like solitary confinement, but when you got to be confined in your room or on quarantine, it gives you a little bit of an idea of you not being able to be free and able to interact in public. And so let's just continue on to stick to it and continue on to gather some young people. One of the things, Barbara, in the protest, and this is why I say with the Black Lives Matter and the things that they address with the police brutality, they came out in numbers. That's what shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
That's what shut everything down. They came out in numbers. And when they was able to demonstrate in that way, you change stuff. And that's what I'm saying. If we got to go get the young people, if we got to go to the streets, if we got to continue on to knock on these churches' doors and hold them accountable, to make sure that they say something about it and that they will address it. That's why I said Connect does that. But yet we can do some more of that in our own community to get the church, hold our leadership accountable, that we got somebody's son and somebody's daughters in that prison. Do we have to wait till it's your son and daughter in order for something to change? Is that what it's going to take? Come on, we don't need to do that. Your son is my son. Your daughter is my daughter. And that's how we got to look at it. We have to take that on so that we really can make that difference. But Barbara, again, everyone up here, continue on to do the great work that you're doing. Brother Ray and Brother Michael, continue on to stay strong. You represent all of them other brothers that are incarcerated.
Thank you very much, Pastor. I just noticed Mr. Lax is up here. He's another person who recently was released from prison. And I'd like for him to take a few minutes before we have questions and comments, because I'm sure there might be some, and I don't want to do a webinar and not hear from the people who took the time to come up here. So before we turn to that, I wanted to hear from Mr. Lax to just give us an idea about, I mean, you're someone who recently was released. So I want to know how the Protect Act, not the Protect Act, how the executive order, if it made any changes, any positive changes in what's going on in prison now. And if you were there long enough to know when things were a whole lot different, if you can speak to that. Thank you. Is Mr. Lax here?
He on mute, he don't know.
We can't hear you.
Just unmute your phone or your computer. Can the host unmute him?
Maddie, can you unmute him?
I can only ask him to unmute. I invited him to unmute, but I won't be able to.
But you did mention it to him.
Reflecting.
Hey, Junie, look for the microphone. It's a microphone on there, Junie.
I'll give him a few minutes to see if he can get it right. And in the meantime, just read you a little
Barbara,
bit
can I say
from,
something
pardon me?
real quick? No, I just want to, recognize Tracy too, the pastor, recognize Ray and I as incarcerated, previously incarcerated folks. And, we know that Tracy was inside York and endured things that we probably couldn't even imagine as men. So I just want to acknowledge Tracy.
Thank you, brother. I definitely didn't mean to leave her out. I'm so sorry, Tracy. Because I don't
thought you
see
mentioned her.
I didn't, and I'm so sorry.
Okay.
If I did, I definitely would never want to leave her out or anything or anyone out. Thank you, brother Mike.
No problem, bro.
Okay, I'm gonna read a little bit from
Thank you for
Lamont's
acknowledging
letter.
me. Sorry, I'm on a corrections call right now. Thank you.
Can you mute yourself? So I wanted to read a little bit from Lamont's response to us when he vetoed the bill. It says, I fully support the purpose of this legislation to make sure that isolated confinement is not used in any correctional facility in Connecticut. Under my directive today, the Commissioner of Correction will increase out of cell time for all incarcerated individuals, including those individuals in restrictive status, and he will do so within the effective dates of this bill. But he will also do so in a manner that prioritizes the safety of the people in the Department of Corrections custody and the employees, and not only correctional officers, but teachers, chaplains, mental health counselors, and addiction. He said, and he went on to say, these rules, which are stronger than both the United Nations Mandela rules and progressive policies and laws instituted in other states, will be implemented across all Department of Corrections facilities within 150 days. The executive order also directs the commissioner to file a report within 90 days that outlines the steps taken to increase contact visits and decrease the use of in-cell restraints. I'm not signing this legislation because, as written, it puts the safety of incarcerated people and correction employees at substantial risk. So just from some of the comments he made about, what they're doing is even higher than the United Nations Mandela rules tells me someone needs to look at the Mandela rules, and we need to stop telling ourselves stories that are not true, that we are such a progressive state and we are doing such a great job around these issues. And then finally, when he says talk about decreasing the use of in-cell restraint. In-cell restraint means someone's already in a cage and you're chaining them up in that cage in positions where they can't even sit up straight. So I want to make sure when people hear in-cell restraints, there is absolutely no excuse for being this brutal to another human being, none. So there is no decrease to use. It's absolutely should be abolished if we are in any way trying to say we are a humane society. So I hope somebody goes, just says a little something to this governor, because he obviously has no clue about what's going on behind bars. And for his first statement to be, I fully support the legislation, and then to turn around and veto it, like Tracy said, it was beyond a slap in our face.
And I hate to state the obvious, but I get calls every day from guys inside, and the executive order is like essentially they're getting less time now than they were before the executive order. So,
so they found ways to get around the executive order.
Yeah, I mean, they're using COVID obviously, but guys are getting, I just got a call just now. Guy said they'll come out one shift today and then they'll be locked down the next shift. He said, so it's like, essentially, he said, and this is a verbatim quote. He says, we're lucky if we come out for one shift.
Wow.
So I guess, and I can't remember how the stages go, but they're like stage 3, stage 1. Their stages are, I remember this much. They're the reverse of the free society. So whatever the number is, think about it in reverse. So when they're in 3, we probably would be in 2 or 1 or something like that. But long story short, they're in there and it's like they have the rec modified down to they're splitting the units up for anybody that's been into the facility before. You have a top tier and a bottom tier, and they're splitting the tiers into 4 pieces. So you got it's quarters. And then so they're coming out for, you know, a half hour each section.
For the day. So out of 24 hours, they're out a half an hour.
They're getting a half hour, 45 minutes tops.
Yeah. So like you said, they've made the executive orders actually made things worse rather than better.
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, Barb, Alex is unmuted. I mean, Mr. Lax is unmuted.
Mr. Lax, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Hi, how are you? Thank you for showing up today to talk to us about what's going on inside. You were released how long ago?
About 48 days ago.
Oh, wow. So you're brand new out.
Yes.
Okay. So talk to us about and were you in a long period of time? So you were in before all of this lockdown in the cell time?
Yes. Yeah, I was in since 94.
Oh, okay. So can you talk about the change from all the hours that people had to come out and do things and socialize? And do you remember exactly when everything started sliding downward to we're just going to warehouse people and keep them in the cages all day and we're just, we're just going to have an easy job here? Can you talk about that transformation?
Yeah, from the beginning, I was incarcerated before that too, but in the beginning of 94, stuff like that, you was out recreation and stuff like that was a lot more lenient than it is. I think it started changing around, I would say 98, 97, when, a lot of older COs there that weaned on the way out, retired and stuff, had a little more compassion than the new generation of COs.
Mm.
And it was a little more up to the effect where inmates policed each other as opposed to the COs and the correction officers policing everything. So now everything is in the control of the officers. What really messed things up in the institution was, for me, I believe, is when they built McDougal, Gardner, and all those other jails. That way, when they separated, it's like when they separated and divided people up in these new institutions, Gardner, McDougal, and those places like that, it's a stronger lockdown. And as opposed when Summers was back in the days, it was a prison and inmates ran it. It was more like that. So now when you come into this time now, and with the new thing that passed when I was there, COs would say, even if you would speak on that, COs would say, that's not going to happen.
Mm.
You will hear correctional officers say, that's not going to happen. You'll never be out 4 hours a day. Things like that. That's not going to happen. And now that the conditions, you see brothers, they closing down blocks. So brothers are scared for their health with the water, all those kind of things. Even the food changed dramatically. The food is like, I don't like to call food garbage, but the food is completely garbage in there now, as opposed how you ate 15 years ago. I know you've been around a while. You see guys come out there healthy, but now you see guys come out, you don't know where they've been at. It's different. Everything changed in there. I don't know. It's bad.
Yeah, I know. Like recently, 2 men died of COVID, and they were 2 men who weren't even sentenced. So they're just going into the prison, became a death sentence. And the thing that I always notice with this governor is that when they talk, first of all, they barely talk about the guys dying. It's like give you a little short synopsis, but the focus always seems to be on talking about what their crime was, as opposed to the fact that they went in and they haven't even been sentenced on anything and they're already dead.
I wanted to mention that in March, I think it was April, I caught COVID. I was in the cell. I wasn't aware of what COVID was. But what they were doing was they were allowing certain inmates to go to these shops at night. This was when it was booming in the jail in Osborne. So they was letting people go to work on third shift in his clothing factory. And they were going in and out of the unit coming back. So I caught COVID. I woke up on the floor and I put an article in the paper about it. I have the article. So I woke up on the floor. I got wrapped in plastic. I was put in punitive segregation. And
Wow.
2 days later, I was transferred to Northern. I had to stay in Northern in one of those cold cells for 21 days. I didn't think I was going to make it for the first week. I'm not going to lie to you because I didn't know what was happening. I was freezing like I've never felt before. So all they telling you is that we're going to give you Tylenol and try to wean you off, but they put you in a solitary confinement cell. So now when you go through that, and I was blessed to be able to come up out of that, and I had to wait like a week to come back to Osborne. And you know, Ray and Mike know when you're incarcerated over a time, a period like that, you accumulate a lot of things. So I lost damn near all my property and everything for that move. I was punished for catching COVID like I punched the CO in the face or something. The same thing would happen if you punch a CO in the face. That I went through, the same thing would happen if you could assaulted a CO would happen if you catch COVID.
Wow.
So I put that article in the paper. So and so now you got people in jail. If they get sick, they won't even report it.
Right. Yeah, I
You
used to
don't-
get letters from guys like that said we're sick, but the fact that we would have to go to Northern, they'd rather just stay in their cells.
Yeah.
And then
Even
recently,
now.
I heard from a media person that he was talking about maybe reopening Northern to accommodate COVID. Is like, this is insane. This hell should never have ever been built for any human being to be in. That showed a very, very sick mind. But we finally closed it, and not because the governor didn't say or the commissioner didn't say we're closing it because this place is inhumane and we need to stop torture. It was more about saving money. And so what I'm hearing is some of the same things that were going on, some of the same brutality that was going on in Northern now is happening in places like McDougal. And when the reporters mentioned to me that that a CO was talking about opening up Northern again, I just can't believe that they're even considering. That place needs to be condemned and be a part of the ugliest part of Connecticut history. But if we don't do anything about it, they're already talking about reopening Northern.
Yeah. And Northern is not a place to be if you got COVID. That's not a place to heal up if you got COVID. There's nowhere near any kind of hospital, anywhere near that. You're in a cold cell and you're by yourself and they checking on you every half hour. So it's no place to be if you got COVID. That's out the question.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even not to mention if you punish, you shouldn't even be in there that long. But you know, I know guys that have been in there for years and I can just imagine that.
And what are do you ever get to see any of those guys who've been in there for years? Because I can't even imagine what they must look like now.
Yeah, I know some, but they not right.
Well.
I know some that came through that out here, and just being around them, I know that they spent a lot of years. You know, I know a couple that disappeared. They're not even in New Haven no more. I inquire about them from here now, but from one I seen in a video, he's gone. And another one, he's disappeared. But dudes that I know that spent 10 years or better in Northern, they're not in a good state of mind. They're really out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I could say that bothers me about all this is that the COs get to do these things to people and they get to go home at night and then retire with nice pensions. And then we family members have to live with the pain and trauma of what happened to our loved one. And my son is, his story started out at going in there at the day he turned 17, going into Northern. I didn't even realize that place existed until my son went there and watched him just lose his mind. And then get put on all kind of meds and stuff. And the good thing about when my son was in that a lot of men didn't have is that I actually had built a relationship with the commissioner. And so I asked to have a meeting with all the people who were having anything to do with taking care of my son. And sitting down with them, I seen the poor medical care that you get, because depending on who was looking at my son, there was a whole different diagnosis. They had him on so many pills. I didn't think he'd ever have a brain to even function after all of that. And he came out, and like I said, because he had his family to support him, he can do well for a while. The pandemic started wearing on him, like it's wearing on a lot of people. And the fact that I didn't mention he was 17 at the time, he's 40 now. And so it's just been hell, watching my son deteriorate like this, my youngest son, and someone who went in as as far as I'm concerned, he was like one of the greatest lyricists that we had in New Haven. He and one of my older sons would perform on stages and all that. Used to write music. All of that went in Northern. When Northern stole his soul, it stole so much of his life. And our family has had to deal with what was left of my son. And right now he's in one of those phases where he's not doing well, and he's on the street, and we can't even reach him. But we've gone through that for so many years. And so it upsets me that they were allowed to do this to my son and nobody has to pay for it. We have to keep trying to hope that he has the resilience to bounce back. But this is what we have to live with after being in a place like that. And like I said, sometimes he presents well, you'd never know anything's wrong with him, but he's an emotional mess. And to be honest, and and it's always painful for me because he told me a couple years ago, he said, "Mom, I'll never be the same after that." He said, but if I could be 70%, I'm okay. And so just to hear that as a parent, there's no love that I think deeper than a mother's love for her child. So it's extremely painful for me. And what's even more painful is seeing that phone ring and praying that my son didn't get to color broader's point that he said he just couldn't take it anymore. And so that's a pain we have to live with, not only me, but so many others. Others may not talk about it, but that's a pain we have to live with. And then for CEOs to just say, well, I was just doing my job, and people who don't have to experience that to just turn a blind eye and a deaf ear, like our families don't matter. And then I look at what's going on in Manson Youth now, where my son's pain started, because that's what he's living off. He's living off that pain that he never was able to overcome. And now we have how many young kids, 80% Black and brown, in Manson being treated in the same manner? I mean, when does it stop? When does it stop? How do we get people with that don't seem to have compassion or can't seem to connect with Black and brown people's pain? How do we get to change them so that, somebody like Lamont wouldn't feel safe to just veto this bill? I just don't know what else is left to do. But like I said, I have to always rise above my own individual pain and think more and stay focused on the pain of a larger community, because we have a whole generation of kids being destroyed right now as we speak. And we just can't just sit by and let it happen. I'm just going to leave it there. So I think this is time maybe to open up for questions, because this time, like I said, I knew it was going to go by fast, and we have less than 15 minutes. So if there's anyone who has any questions, any concerns. Oh, and I'm sorry, before I bring that up, I just wanted to talk about, because I don't want to have a webinar and don't talk about the things that people can do. But some of the things that we can do individually and organizationally for this win, because we will win. Talking to your legislators, talking to your congregations, encouraging your businesses and your communities to understand what we're trying to do and to get them to sign on with us, think about having house parties, library events, writing letters to the governor, calling the governor, emailing the governor, even though it may not make a difference, but at least you did it. And support us on our days, what we call lobby days, when we'll be outside the Capitol, when the legislators will be coming through, and we try to show up. You can show up in our shirts. You don't have to, but we always have shirts and masks for anybody who shows up. You can use your Twitter and Facebook accounts to get this message out. There's so many things that we can do. And so I just want to put some of those ideas out there and hope we can get this job done. And so in respect to those people who showed up and have a question or comment, I want to give them the opportunity to say that. And I want to shout out, a special shout out to Karan Butler, because I know he's been very supportive of us. He's come to Connecticut, and I talked to him recently, or texted him recently, and he said he's still on board with us. So I know he's out there in the audience. And so thank you, Karan Butler, for showing up, and for anybody out there who's on board with us to get this bill signed this time. So are there any questions or comments that people want to make before this is over?
Barbara, this is Hope. I just wanted to add one thing to what you're saying, which is to lift up something that Senator Winfield was saying, which is that we need to take this fight to places where people have the luxury of not thinking about it. So if very specifically, if anybody on the call has connections with districts and or organizations out in the suburbs or rural areas, especially where prisons are located, there are very specific things that you can do, including writing op-eds in local papers. You could contact Barbara or one of the steering committee members about hosting something like this, but specifically for your community. And I think it's really through trying to bring this message outside of our urban centers and to places where people, as I said, have the luxury of not knowing what's really happening. So I just wanted to lift that up because I thought that was an important point. We need to make Lamont and the others feel the pain and know that there's going to be a political cost if they don't carry through.
Right. And the reason I wanted to, I just want to say the reason I wanted to give a special shout out to Karan Butler, because he did those kind of things. He came to Connecticut, he put tweets up, he talked about his own experience being in solitary as a child. And even I noticed on that day that he talked about it, a tear came down. So we continue to live with this pain. Just because we present well and we may become big stars and all of that stuff, what they have done to our young people at a young age, because they were so young, and we just had to move into survival mode. There is no healing, it's just survival. And so that's why I mentioned Karan being on here, because he has done all those things that I have asked people to do. And he said he's right on board with us.
Am I still being heard on this?
Mm-hmm.
Barbara, I just want to say, in the institutions, you are a very good champion for the people. And that's why I really wanted to join this group right here to speak. And you do so much for the people that is very commendable of you to do that. Your name rings bells in there, and you're a lifeline for a lot of brothers that's in there. I just want to say that 15, 20 years ago, I've just heard about your work. And I know pretty soon, good work is going to pay off. And I just want to let you know I appreciate the stuff that you was doing and that you do.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Did anyone have a question or a comment before we leave?
Yeah, Barb, we've got some questions in the Q&A, so I'll go ahead and read a couple of those at once, if that's all right, so panelists can speak to those. And just so everyone knows, you can put a question in the Q&A. You can also use the raise hand function and we'll get to you as well. So we have a question from Judy Meikle. Lamont caved to pressure from the CO union who threatened to strike. What's the strategy here? A second question that I'll throw out there. Are there any plans to change some of the language of the bill, or will it be resubmitted as is? And then,
well, number two, I can say we have changed some of the language, because we the first time we didn't mention strip searches, but the more we thought about it, it is sexual assault, sanctioned by the state, and we need to have some strict guidelines. And no longer will that just be a norm. You can just degrade and humiliate people by having them strip search all the time, just because. As far as the unions, I mean, so if they want to strike, that's just me. If you want to strike, strike. We can't stop doing the right thing because somebody's gonna push up against us. We never get anywhere. If that's their option, so be it. I mean,
I'd like
unless
to
somebody
speak to
else
that.
has a different way that they think we should handle it. I don't
I
care
like-
the pressure.
Can
I'd
I
like to
just say,
speak-
with what regard to Barb said, is that part of the other problem we've had with this commissioner and this commission is that we have lots of evidence in states like Colorado, where the unions, since they have passed laws regarding solitary confinement, the community, the corrections officers, and the people that are incarcerated all have benefited. If we could get people to listen to some of the data, as someone was saying early, that's out there, to get that data out there, I think that's one of the ways to come up against this.
I'd just like to say that one of the things that everyone should be interested and focused on is the culture that's been created within the Department of Corrections. We have a culture where these individuals, all the way up to curos, have came up in the ranks together. If you look at our district administrators, our captains, our wardens, they were all co-workers. They were all in the same classes, graduating classes together. So they all are co-defendants in creating a culture, which is a chillax culture where COs come to work and they get to chill out and they get to relax on the state dollar. I've said that it's in the newspaper. I've toured Governor Lamont when I was a mentor in the TRUE program. The TRUE program comes out for 13 hours a day. So, and we work with young men in between the ages of 18 and 25, which equates to 25% of the disciplinary reports in the whole state of connections within the Department of Corrections. There hasn't been one fight in the TRUE program since its inception. So the numbers can show that if you allow individuals outside of their cells for a longer period of time, the level of violence will decrease. But if you're letting individuals out for 1 or 2 hours, you're having them fight for the phone, you're having them fight for the shower, you're creating a culture that you want to continue to exist.
Right.
And you want to say that it's unsafe. That's the biggest fallacy there is. Because I've lived in that unit for 3 years without one fight amongst these young men, these hot heads that we would say were in the institutions. I've toured Lamont. If you Google it, you'll see Lamont Goes to Prison. You'll see Ray Boyd standing right next to him and touring him and telling him how this system works. It works when you have everybody in a cohesive unit working together. You have the staff working with the inmates and the counselors and so on and so forth. And this is how you create a whole new environment that's not like the general population of today, where you're coming out for 22 hours and or 50 minutes. You get an hour in the morning, which some officers says is an hour, but it's actually 50 minutes. So a lot of this stuff is created by the staff, the frustration. And that frustration just rolls over to someone fighting over the phone or someone fighting because they wanted time in the shower or whatever. But the TRUE program comes out for 13 hours every day and there's no fight in there. So I'm pretty sure that more mature adults that are in Gardner, that are in McDougal, that are in Willard Cybulski, and so on and so forth, if you allow these guys out for that time that, you know, the bill says we should get out, you won't have these problems.
Right. So how do we get them to do the right thing?
I think we find a way to get Lamont out of office, and we put our political backing behind someone that is willing to do a national search for a commissioner that is not willing to give in to a union staff that says we're going to strike. Half of these guys have, they lack education. I've been in the system 29 years and a half. They lack education. They don't have no other outlet but corrections.
Right.
They've already used most of their PL days, their IL days to finagle the system with what's going on now. So they don't have that many days on the books before they say, look, we got to get back to work. So let's go ahead and give these guys a time out to sell, and let's find a way to work around it.
No, I'm behind that. I don't think caving into them is going to make any changes in our system at all. Are there any other questions, Maddie? Or concerns?
Yeah, there's a couple more in the chat, but I'll go first if you're there to Alan Wolf, who has their hand raised in the Zoom.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, hi. So as you were describing early in the session, the definitions of treatment of torture, I know from personal experience with my son, who is incarcerated at the moment. He was transferred from another facility to Osborne, which I think is the former Summers.
Right.
At Osborne, he was in a 6x8 cell. He was transferred for medical reasons. He was in a 6x8 cell with another prisoner, and in that space they had 2 bunks and a sink and a toilet. And he told me he was in there 22 hours a day. No disciplinary reasons. That was just the standard schedule. And after he would have 1 hour for meals and another hour for so-called recreation. But if that's true, then he was suffering torture, which we felt, and it's a general practice at Osborne.
Yes, it is.
I spent several years at Osborne, and I can tell you that when Osborne, which is the old Summers prison, they changed the name from Summers to Osborne because it gave the city of Summers a bad recognition. But those cells were designed for only one man to live in those cells.
Right.
If you ever seen a picture of a cell inside Osborne, you can't walk past another person without bumping into them in the cells. So that is solitary confinement. Your son is not lying to you. That's the only time you pretty much get outside your cell a day is an hour in the morning, an hour at night. And if you work or go to school and you don't during the day, you only get that recreation at night. So you're pretty much losing out if you have a job or work.
So my point is that it really is an institutional torture. You don't have to necessarily offend or do something wrong to the system. You just experience that.
People were amazed to hear that.
Yeah.
People were amazed to hear that people stay in the cell that long. They thought solitary confinement was about disciplining someone. They didn't know that this is a norm for quite a few facilities.
And this is one of the reasons why you have some inmates seeking to be transferred out of state in the Connecticut Department of Corrections, because they know that out in Massachusetts or whatever state Connecticut shares an inner compact with, they'll receive more time out of their cells. They'll receive more programming and rehabilitative efforts, because in the state of Connecticut, there's limited rehabilitative efforts other than just sitting in yourself. You don't have the family support of friends and loved ones to help you educate yourself, or whatever you want to go to school for, whatever you want to learn. You're pretty much in your cell waiting to be released, the same person or a worse person than you were when you came in.
Yeah.
And that's like the key thing that I think somebody that was here a little while ago, and he kind of was going to speak and he chickened out. But one of the things he said was like, everybody's dancing around the main issue, which is that, and when Senator Vinfield was talking, he kind of talked about it, but this is that you know, most people are coming home, right? You know, Ray was in there for almost 3 decades. I was in there for 2.5 decades. Mr. Lax was in there for almost 3 decades, right? These are people that's been in prison for so long. Like, look at the difficulty of Mr. Lax getting on the Zoom call. Why? Because you have a person confined for so long while society is changing, technology is changing, right? And you come out, you dropping somebody into a situation where how does that person supposed to function, especially without support, right? Because I have my problems with tech. I'm still having problems with tech. Like, I got a job, right? I think some of you know Alex gave me a job. I work for Alex, right? And so I'm working, it seems like I'm working much harder than everybody else. And I'm still behind because everybody's using the tech efficiently, whereas I'm not. I'm trying to learn on the job the tech while doing my job. So it's that much harder, right? And so, you know, doing simple things though, like just simple things. Cause you know, Junie, Alexander Lax, he called me, you know, trying to get on the Zoom. That's, you saw me with the 2 phones in my hand. I'm trying to talk him through it. And then I couldn't do it. And then somebody was there trying to help him out with it. And from what they were saying, I was like fearful for him of somebody trying to scam him by having his phone, because they were saying like, oh, you got to download this. And I'm like, no, you got to download nothing. I said, you got the email, just click on the link right there. You got to do nothing else. So I'm worrying about something that's going on miles away from me because we don't prepare people we lock up to re-enter society. And so, you know, one of the things that I always thought about when I used to be walking around the compound and stuff, and I'd be like, damn, like, why don't they use all of this space that's not being used to prepare guys? So like, you know, I thought a lot of guys don't have like life skills. Like, I have very limited life skills, right? I never wrote a check before or balanced my checkbook because I was on the fringe. I didn't have a checking account or nothing like that. I didn't do that. So these are things like that we should be teaching guys that are inside, right? Teaching them how to budget, right? So you're inside, right? We do everything mostly what they tell us to do. So you're in there, you say to a guy, you say, listen, you're gonna get this amount of money a month to go to pick a shop. You know what I mean? You got all this property, right? You can do a plumbing shop over here, you can do an electrical over here, you can do a coating over here. You can do all of these different things, right? And you have the guy, because you heard us around all day anyway, right? And we go. So if you tell guys, listen, you pick something that you want to go home and do for a trade or whatever, and you go there for the day, 8 hours or whatever. After breakfast, you don't go back to the cell. You go from breakfast, you go, and that's a structured day for somebody that's going to return to society, right? Now I'm at work learning my trade. I get a certain amount of money at the end of the week. I know that I got to give a certain amount of money for rent, right? That's taken out. I got some for my commissary. I got some for savings. So you're teaching these skills, maybe by force sometime to people, but then they have the skill when they come home to be able to be productive rather than just sending somebody out there with no skills. And then when he messes up, you say, oh, look, this is why we have to lock him up because he's a mess up. No, you putting him out there and he doesn't have what it takes to cope in society. And then we're talking about solitary, which makes a person even worse because now you're making a person probably, some people are introverts already, but some people, you go in and you become antisocial, right? I remember I remember when I knew I was screwed up, right? So after all of these years of being in there, right? And then so you got this antagonistic relationship or hostile relationship with the administration, right? Because they are just most of them want to harm you, right? Psychologically, mentally, right? Some physically, because some want to jump on you. They looking for the chance to jump on you, right? And so I'm in there and I'm adapting to that. So I'm standoffish. I have the same thinking that they have for me, I got for them, and I stay away. And then I'm like that with some of the guys that are around me. So I'm kind of building up this antisocial persona and don't even realize it, right? And the day when I found out was when I got accepted into Wesleyan Middlesex's Center for Prison Education, right? And I went down and you got these, young college kids coming in, you got, undergrads coming in, and they're so happy, you know what I mean? And just genuinely happy and wants to, shake your hand and talk to you. And I was put off by it. And when that happened to me and I saw it, I said, something is wrong here, right? Because regular, friendly, normal human interaction wasn't normal to me anymore. And I corrected it. I started working to try to be more social, more, you know what I mean? But until that point, I didn't realize that I was broken, right? And so this is what happens in there. So you got antisocial behavior being learned. You got people being left behind in tech. No social skills being cultivated. You let this person out into society. How do they function in society when they're not conditioned that way, right? So I don't know. I think,
yeah,
like my friend said, we're not thinking about. I mean, and I'm not saying that of the panel. I'm just saying people should be thinking in terms of people coming home and what they need to come home to be the type of people that society says that they should be, or society wants them to be.
Thank you, Michael. Just like I said, when I said it was 5 to 7:30, I know people probably say, oh my God, that's a lot of time, but it always runs over when you're talking about these issues, but we are over. But I just want to say one thing before I leave, because when Ray was talking about how people try to transfer out of Connecticut because it's so bad, I think about the two young men who committed the horrific act in Cheshire. I'm sure we all know about that. And the fact that both of them transferred out of Connecticut, and they have what you guys are talking about. They have more programming. They're one of them's in a medium security prison. Now, how do you go from death row to medium security and all this program and time out of cell because you're not in Connecticut? But one of the things that one of the legislators tried to do to manipulate the crowd was say, bring up that incident, like this is why we are the way we are because of men like this. And the reality is those men are not in Connecticut. They got transferred out. It was too brutal for people who did something that brutal to another family. So we need to stop telling ourselves we're so progressive and just start facing facts. And I want to thank everybody who came out here today. I hope there was some education for people who had no knowledge of what's going on and who now at least have an idea what we're trying to do. And we're not saying let all these prisoners out and be free and have summer camps. We're just saying treat people like human beings. If we're supposed to be better, then we should be treating them like human beings. And that's all we're asking for. And so again, thank you so much. But I have to leave with there's one final quote because it's so important to me always. And it's around Martin Luther King when he talks about the let me just read it. The ultimate measure is this one is the ultimate measure of a man, but I'm going to say the ultimate measure of a person is not how he stands in moments of comfort and convenience and popularity, but where he stands at times of challenges and controversy. And I feel so much in my life doing this work, I've had to stand in challenge and controversy, but I didn't allow it to stop me. And so I'm hoping that it won't allow any of you to stop doing this work. It's so important. And it's not going to be popular. People may not like you, but this is not a popularity contest. This is about saving lives for our future. So thank you very much. I hope you all have a great evening. And you have our contact information, stopsolitaryct.org, to go on our website and find out anything you want to do. And I just want to special shout out to, how did I forget my YEP students in my Lowenstein Clinic, Maddie? I mean, how did I forget them? Those people, I could not have done this without them. So I am so grateful. And thank you so much, Maddie, for staying on to the very end and taking care of all of this for me so I could do the work that I need to do. Awesome appreciation. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Night.
Good night, everyone.